fourth, fifth grade, Sunday school. Bible, 100% true and accurate. Christianity is not a club, it's a relationship with Jesus. Christians, you guys are different from the world, you're different from the other kids, that's a good thing. God created the heavens and the earth. Evolution does not make sense. A review of last time. We're studying Elijah. We catch him at a real bad time in Israel. Ahab and Jezebel are in charge. They are the worst king and queen ever that ruled the northern kingdom of Israel. God said to Elijah, said, I want you to get their attention. So he said, he went to Ahab and said, it's not gonna rain until I tell it well, and tell it that it's going to rain. So 2 years went by, and the third year, a huge drought. Went to Ahab. He got Ahab's attention, and he said, okay, we're gonna have a showdown. You and your people are worshiping idols, you're worshiping Baal, and we're gonna have a showdown to see who's the true God. Do you remember that Elijah called all the people to an area out of town? They built 2 altars, one to Baal and one to the true God. And Elijah said, go first. They sacrificed a bull to Baal and put the wood on the altar, tried to burn it up, tried to call for Baal to send down fire, and he couldn't do it. Elijah mocked him. Elijah's turn, he put the wood on the altar, put the sacrifice on the altar, and called to God, and immediately fire came down from heaven, burned up everything. And the people believed. Elijah called the hundreds of prophets that were around and did away with them. Jezebel found out, and she was mad. She was ready to kill Elijah. Elijah at this time was afraid, and so he went away. An angel helped him. They went to the base of Mount Sinai, and he was discouraged. He went into a cave, and there was a fire, and God was not in the fire. There was a big wind. God was not in the wind. There was an earthquake. God was not in the earthquake. And then a gentle whisper came, and God was in the gentle whisper, and he was able to connect with God. And God at this time told him, you're going to go back, you're going to appoint and anoint 2 new kings at this time. Also, you're going to choose your successor. This meant that Elijah's work on earth was done. Let's see that's where we pick up the story, and let's see what happens. Elijah found Elisha. The way I remember this is there's a J in Elijah. It's first in the alphabet. There's Elisha with an S, and that's second at the end of the alphabet. That's how I separate the two. He was plowing the field with many other people plowing the field. Elijah went and put his cloak across his shoulders, and that meant that he was going to be his successor. And Elisha said, I would like to delay a little bit. I want to go to my mother and father and say goodbye. And Elijah said, okay. When he came back, he found his oxen that he was plowing with, and he killed them for meat, and he roasted them on a fire and used his plow, his wooden plow, for the fire. Okay, this symbolizes that his oxen are gone, his plow is gone, he's not turning back, he's now going to follow Elijah. in his job as prophet. Elijah was close to Elisha. They spent time together, and it was time for Elijah to go away, to be with God in heaven. And they were traveling from Gilgal, and Elijah said to Elisha, "Stay here, for the Lord has told me to go to Bethel." And Elisha replied, "Surely as the Lord lives, and you yourself live, I will never leave you." So they went on together. He said, "I'm not going to leave you." And a group of prophets from Bethel came out, and he said, "Do you know that the Lord is going to take your master away from you today?" Okay, so this is going to happen today. And Elisha said, "Quiet." He said, "Of course I know it." And Elijah said to Elisha, "Stay here. I'm going to Jericho." And Elisha said, "No, I'm going to stick with you." And the same thing happened. A group of prophets from Jericho came out, and they said, "Did you know that the Lord was going to take your master away from you today?" He said, "Quiet." He said, "Of course I know it." Then they went to the Jordan River. "As surely as the Lord lives, and you yourself live, I will never leave you." So they went on together. Okay, 50 men from the group of prophets also went and watched from a distance as Elijah and Elisha stopped beside the Jordan River. Then Elijah folded his cloak together and struck the water with it. The water divided, and the two men went across on dry ground. When they came to the other side, Elijah said to Elisha, "What can I do for you before I'm taken away?" And Elisha said, "Let me become your rightful successor." Okay, what this means is he's asking for a double portion of Elijah's spirit. And this reminds me of further back in the Old Testament, we studied about the birthright in Jewish families. And the firstborn was to receive twice the inheritance of the other children. There was also responsibilities with that, but it's a double portion of his spirit that he was asking for. And Elijah said, "You've asked a difficult thing, but," he said, "if you see me when I am taken from you, then you will get your request. If not, then you won't." As they were walking along, suddenly a chariot of fire appeared, drawn by horses of fire. It drove between them, separated them, and Elisha was carried by a whirlwind into heaven. Elisha saw it and cried out, my father, the chariots and charioteers of Israel," and they disappeared from sight. Elisha tore his robe. Okay, we know what that means. That means he's very sad. This was a symbol that they did. Then Elisha picked up Elijah's cloak and returned to the bank of the Jordan River. He struck the water with the cloak and cried out, "Where is the Lord, the God of Elijah?" Then the river divided just like it did before, and Elisha went across. A group of prophets came, and they saw what happened. They said, "Hey, we'll go look for him. He went up in the whirlwind. We'll go out in the desert, and we'll go look for him." And Elisha said, "No, that's not necessary. He's in heaven now." They encouraged him, and Elisha said, "Well, go ahead." They went out for 3 days, didn't find anything, came back, and Elisha said, "Didn't I tell you to go?" Okay. Elijah was a very special person in several ways. He is one of 2 people in the Bible that went to heaven without having to die on earth. The first one we learned about was in Genesis, and this was Enoch. And we don't know much about Enoch, but we do know that he walked with God, meaning he was very close to God, and he was taken away without having to die. Elijah was the second one, and he went up in the whirlwind. Now, there's other things about Elijah that is predicted in the Old Testament and happened in the New Testament. And Malachi, this is the very end of the Old Testament, And he said, this is Elijah who's gone to heaven. He said, look, I am sending you the prophet Elijah before the great day of the Lord arrives. In other words, before the Messiah comes, Elijah is going to come back. His preaching will turn the hearts of parents to their children and the hearts of children to their parents. Okay, what's this all about? We go to the first part of the New Testament, and this is Elizabeth and Zechariah, and they are Jesus' aunt and uncle. Jesus hasn't been born yet, and in their old age, they have a child. They have a son, and they name him John. Okay, is this a clue as to what's coming? He said he will be filled with the Holy Spirit even before his birth, and he will persuade many Israelites to turn to the Lord their God. He will be a man with the spirit and power of Elijah, the prophet of old. He will precede the coming of the Messiah, the Lord, and preparing people for his arrival. Okay, if you haven't guessed, this is John the Baptist. So John the Baptist comes, and he has Elijah's spirit. More proof. We go to Mark 9. And Peter, James, and John, they began asking him, why do the teachers of religious law insist that Elijah must return before the Messiah comes? And Jesus said to them, he said, yes, they did predict this, and they said that he would be coming. And then he says, but I tell you, Elijah has already come. Okay, more proof. This is Jesus in Matthew 11. I assure you, of all who have ever lived, none is greater than John the Baptist. And here's what Jesus said. He is Elijah, the one the prophets said would come. So Jesus proved that Elijah came back with John the Baptist, and John the Baptist had his spirit. The other thing is, I wanted to mention, I haven't yet, the Jewish people don't believe in Jesus or the New Testament. And they look to Malachi and they say, well, Elijah's going to come back before the Messiah comes. So, interestingly, at Passover, when they celebrate Passover and the meal, they set a place for Elijah, who hasn't come back yet. This next part is my wife's favorite story in the entire Bible. And hope you agree. This is Elisha. He is double spirit of Elijah. And things have happened, and now the Arameans are at war with Israel. And the king of Aram, he would confine with his officers and say, okay, we're going to go to such and such place tomorrow, and we'll mobilize and we're going to attack here. But immediately, Elisha, the man of God, would warn the king of Israel, do not go near that place, for the Aramean army, they're planning to mobilize, don't go there. So they would prepare. So the king of Israel would send a word to that place, indicated by Elisha, warning the people that, to be on their guard. And this happened several times. Then the king of Aram became very upset at this. He called his officers and demanded, we've got a traitor. And they said, no traitor here. Who's been informing the king of Israel of my plans? He said, it's not us. He said, it is Elisha. He knows even the words that you tell your army. And he is warning the Israelites to be prepared. So the king commanded, he said, go out and find where Elisha is, and we'll send troops to seize him and capture him. And the report came back that Elisha's in Dothan. So that night the king of Aram sent a great army with many chariots and horses to surround the city of Dothan. And Elisha had a servant. And the servant got up early the next morning and went outside and saw troops, horses, and chariots everywhere. And he was afraid. He said, Elisha, what are we going to do now? And Elisha says, don't be afraid. Listen to this. There are more on our side than on theirs. Now, does that make any sense? Here it is, Elisha and the servant. There are only two of them, and they're surrounded by an army. And the servant, I'm sure he didn't know what he was talking about. Then Elisha prayed, O Lord, open his eyes and let him see. The Lord opened the servant's eyes, and when he looked up, he saw that the hillside around Elisha was filled with horses and chariots of fire. Of course, these were God's angels on God's side. As the Aramean army advanced toward them, Elisha prayed again. He said, make them blind, make the entire army blind. And the Lord did as Elisha asked. And Elisha went out and told them. Of course, they're blind, they can't see. And Elisha said, you've come the wrong way. This isn't the right city. Follow me and I'll take you to the man you're looking for. Okay, he was tricking him. And then he led them into Israel, into Samaria at that time. And they were blind, didn't know where they were going. As soon as they entered Samaria, Elijah prayed, oh Lord, open their eyes and let them see. And the Lord did. And they discovered that they were in Samaria. And then the king in Samaria, the king of Israel, he saw them. He went to Elijah and said, should we kill them? We've got the army right here. And Elisha said, no, don't kill them. We don't kill prisoners of war. Give them food and drink and send them home again to their master. So the king made a great feast for them and sent them home to their king. After that, the Aramean raiders stayed away from the land of Israel. Okay, obviously they saw that the power that they had with the army compared to the power that God had through Elisha and Israel was much greater, and they were afraid. And so the enemy was stronger, so they stayed away from him. Okay. As far as an application, I love it. Elijah's servant, he was worried about the Aramean army. What do we worry about? Okay. And think of things, it might be grades, it might be bullies, it might be being accepted, it might be a virus, it might be lonely, it might be afraid, it might be in trouble. And what are we afraid of? Now, if Elisha said what he said and is true, we have two very powerful instruments from God. One is inside, that's the Holy Spirit. We have God inside of us to help us, to counsel us, to give us ideas, but we can't see it. Or we have angels. Angels in the Old Testament had various roles. We think of them mainly to protect. Sometimes they give messages, other types of roles that they did. But you think of angels mainly as protecting. Okay. Now, we can't see them. And object lesson. This plate would represent God's security. The penny is us. And say we're afraid and we're worried and we're having trouble and we have forces, we have powers. Is there anybody in the class that would believe that I can put this penny in this plate of security without touching it with anything you can see? And of course the class is shaking their heads. No, you can't possibly do that. Ooh. So the lesson, obviously, you got the Holy Spirit, you've got the angels. we can experience his power if we stay close to him, if we call on him. I've got two great verses to remember. Remember the object lesson. We can call on God's power, his forces. Satan attacks us. He makes us afraid. He makes us lonely sometimes. All of these things, afraid of other people, afraid of being in trouble. If we can call on him, he's invisible. We can have his peace and security. Two great verses. One is from Romans 8:31. If God is with us, who can be against us? Okay, and that's not Satan. This is from our lesson. Don't be afraid, Elisha told the servants. There are more on our side than are on theirs. There are more on our side than are theirs. Okay. Thank you. I hope you remember these things when you're in trouble or afraid and you need God's help.